Well, at a customary pre-budget consultation meeting with Finance Minister P. Chidambaram this evening, India Inc. has suggested that the government avoid any new taxes. Also on the wish list, speedy implementation of the goods and services tax. Listen in as corporates detail their demands on what they're expecting from Budget 2013.
Our recommendations from FICCI were that the tax structures be left unchanged. There should be no new additional taxes considered in view of the turn in sentiment, which is now cautiously optimistic, but we want to make sure that the investment cycle returns in the country. Across the board, every representative endorsed the fact that GST was critical for industry, for our sector, for GDP growth, for the country.
The auto industry is a potential element to kickstart growth, and it should not be treated as a golden goose which has to be taxed. We need a stable regulatory regimes, otherwise companies like ours will hesitate before making substantial investments. We are on the verge of making a very major investment, but we are held up by an uncertain regulatory regime. There is all this talk about taxes on diesel cars, and naturally then we balk at investment. So we want a very clear, predictable regulatory environment.
The most important suggestion we have made is that the goods and services tax should be brought in early, because that one reform will add 1.5 to 2 percentage points to India's GDP growth rate, other things being equal. If that is done, the economy will be transformed, and I think almost all the people there made that suggestion, and I think the ministry officials have taken it on board.
Telecom sector is very bad position, so finance minister should take the telecom sector in infrastructure. I requested finance minister to GST is very much inflation is very much important.
Apart from that wish list, leaders of industry have strongly opposed the proposal to tax higher income groups at differential rates, and one of those taxes that are being considered is the inheritance tax. This is what they say would be counterproductive. Listen in to what comments came in on this front.
Any additional taxes could change the sentiment back, and what would be good, of course, is to encourage that money, the savings, particularly the wealthy monies that are tempted to be taxed, rather than tax them, to direct them into charity, to direct them into productive investment. Could be another way of handling this. In itself, we believe inheritance tax is a bad idea.
Generally, it's made a suggestion that there should be no provisions in the budget which create a negative perception and sentiment. Last time, unfortunately, in the budget there were some negative perception and sentiment issues. We should avoid them.
Super rich can be taxed, but tax should be reasonable. And the super rich have money, they are for use for the investment, and by this investment the employment will be generated, excise will be more generated.
Let's go across to Satyajit on this. Satyajit, you've been tracking the meet. What's the mood like among India Inc.?
Well, the India Inc. captains today met the finance minister specifically on the budget as to what the wish list is, what they want the budget to endorse and what they want the budget this year to keep out. First point that has been mentioned by all is that keeping in mind that the economy needs a boost and the sentiments of the markets also requires an upside move. Keeping that in mind, they've mentioned that there should not be any kind of increase in tax rates, as that is going to deter GDP growth, leading not only to fall in the collection overall for the government, but also it is going to hurt the sentiments of the markets. Second point is, of course, the GST. Across board, they are all in saying that GST is one thing that should be endorsed in this budget, as that is going to boost the economy this particular year. It is going to help the economy grow as much as by 1.5 to 2 percentage point, as Adi Godrej himself mentioned. Another point mentioned specifically by Anand Mahindra is on the auto space. He said that it is one favorite space which the government wants to tax every time, but this time if there is taxation, it will adversely affect any kind of investment by not only the Mahindras but also by any kind of auto companies, and these are the few aspects that they want to be dealt with going ahead. But overall, any move that is going to be beneficial for the markets, for the sentiments, for the economy is something that they welcome, and any move that is not going to help the economy is something that they want this particular budget to keep out.
Let's also go across to Mr. Adi Godrej of the Godrej Group to get a better sense of really what happened today at that meeting. Mr. Godrej, thanks for joining us. How was the meeting today according to you? What were the key items on the agenda?
It was a good meeting. There were representatives from several industry associations. There were some individual business persons also. And CII gave its views on what needs to be done. Our main point was that the concentration was on reviving GDP growth. So the most important thing required for that, and the most quickest way we can do that would be early introduction of the goods and services tax. We have also recommended things like a special accelerated depreciation for early investments for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, which could help improve the investment climate. But the most important point we made was nothing should be brought in the budget which could negatively affect the perception and sentiment for investment and growth. Like we had retrospective amendments and GAR introductions in the last budget. So we have strongly suggested that nothing of that sort should be brought in, because if the sentiment turns negative, it could seriously affect both growth and investment.
Mr. Godrej, very importantly that you mentioned the quick implementation of the goods and services tax. Now that has been in the pipeline for a very long time. Industry has been asking for it. Do you think now the goods and services tax will make the deadline? We've been hearing otherwise, really.
No, I don't think that is correct. I've seen some reports in the media. I think GST is eminently possible. It needs clearly a meeting of minds between the government and the BJP states especially. I think there is a meeting which will take place on the 28th among the states, and I think all effort should be made to see that GST is implemented during this financial year. Even if it does get delayed, we should ensure that it's not much of a delay. Maybe a 3-month delay could be taken in stride, but I have seen some media reports which I do not agree with, that it cannot be done early.
Mr. Godrej, while maintaining investment climate or positive one is key, it's also expected to be a populist budget this time around as it's so close to elections. Is that the impression you got from the meeting today?
No, I don't think it will be a populist budget in the sense that it will pander to policies that do not create economic growth. I don't think so. We have clearly said that it should be growth-oriented. In fact, the finance minister started his opening remarks by saying that the most important objective is to get growth accelerated and get back to from a 5 to 6% growth rate to an 8 to 9% growth rate. So I don't expect anything of that sort. But what one should be very careful is that nothing which creates a negative perception creeps into the budget as we had in the last budget.
But Mr. Godrej, as far as growth is concerned, monetary policy is going to be quite central, and still we're not hearing or seeing signs of that easing anytime soon. Even today we've heard from Mr. Subbarao, and he's concerned about inflation. So what's your own sense as far as interest rates are concerned?
Well, it's difficult for me to predict what the central bank will do, but I clearly feel, and CII has made our representation, that interest rates need to be brought down, and even CRR should be brought down. Cash infusion in the economy should be increased, and in fact we feel that the high interest rates are working against inflation coming down, because what's happening is high interest rates are preventing increase in GDP growth rates. That is leading to a depreciation of the rupee, and since a lot of our commodity prices and other prices depend on international prices, with a depreciated rupee, it is adding to inflation. So I think it's about time considerable cut in rates is brought about. I think inflationary expectations are also low. I don't think one should pay too much heed to remarks here and there. Clearly, inflation is not already down, but it is not important to look at historical inflation. It's important to look at inflationary expectations.
Now, one thing, however, that may come up in the budget, as we also heard from Mr. Godrej, is the goods and services tax. Mr. Godrej, thanks so much for joining us tonight and taking us through the highlights of that meeting.